Welcome everybody to Oulton Park, where we are about to enjoy our second race of the weekend for the Caterham 7 Championship UK. They raced yesterday afternoon, and I'll tell you what, they had the crowd here at Oulton Park on the edge of their seats. It was a proper Caterham slipstreaming race over 30 minutes. It was never dull. We never quite knew what the outcome was going to be, and we're looking forward now to doing it all over again here on this Sunday afternoon. It's overcast, but it's still warm. The humidity's been hovering around 80% all day, but we've never really had any rain, maybe the odd drop here and there, but certainly not enough to make the circuit damp or slippery. So we're hoping for dry conditions over the course of this second and final race of what is actually the penultimate event of the season for the Avon Tyres Caterham 7 Championship UK. They've raced at Oulton Park, Knock Hill, Silverstone, Brands Hatch. They're now here at Oulton Park, and it will all be completed at Cadwell Park in a few weeks' time. So the race you're about to see could have a pretty strong impact on the outcome of the 2021 Championship. It's not a championship we've seen racing so far this year on the British GT package. We're really happy to have Caterham involvement once again in a British GT event. And as I said, yesterday's race won by Stephen Nuttall, who was the championship leader arriving here at Oulton Park. And he managed to get another race victory yesterday, followed home pretty closely by James Murphy and Henry Heaton. Had a brilliant battle right to the flag, but the crowd, as I said yesterday, enjoyed the race. There are even more people here today. It may not be Easter Bank Holiday, which is the traditional date for this event, but Oulton Park and GT Cars and their various support races always draw out the crowd. It's a great day out here. Not even a particularly long day either on a Sunday, because we start racing at 12, we finish at about 6 o'clock. We cram a lot of racing action into that time, and even the local wildlife are enjoying what's going on here today. Our thanks, of course, as always, to the marshals as well, who are out on the circuit or around the circuit, ready and waiting to deal with any incidents that may occur. And they had a couple yesterday to deal with in our Caterham 7 UK Championship race. We had a collision, unfortunately, for William Smith, which saw he and Gordon Sawyer, who had charged through after a bit of a lacklustre start. They made contact at Cascades, and that unfortunately put William Smith out of the race. Rob Watts also ended up out of the race. I seem to recall that being down at the Hislops chicane. But it was a very entertaining battle, which for much of the first sort of 10 minutes of the 30-minute race was an 11-car train for the race lead, which basically was almost the whole field. There were 15 starters, and 11 of them were in that lead pack until quite a long way into the race, really, when eventually it started to fragment. One or two incidents allowed the leaders to pull away, and Stephen Nuttall was the winner, really, just because he was able to build a little bit of a cushion, a second or so, over James Murphy and Henry Heaton in the final third of the race. And as those two then debated second place, it allowed Nuttall to break the toe. That's so important in Caterham racings because they're not very aerodynamic. The slipstream is worth a huge chunk of time, even on a circuit like this one. And so if you can break out of that sort of second and a half window at the front, then you might just be able to make a break for it and coast to the victory, which is exactly what Stephen was able to do, and exactly what he'll be looking to try and do again in this race, I'm sure. It was Stephen's 4th victory of the year. He's won at least one race at every event so far. His 5th victory of the season, I should say. Didn't win at Knock Hill. That's the only event he didn't win at, but he did have a couple of podiums there, and that meant that arriving here at Oulton Park, he was 16 points clear in the championship of Henry Heaton, but Henry Heaton managed to get on the podium yesterday as well, so the gap hasn't gone out by a huge amount between the two of them. Gordon Sawyer, from a points perspective, in the number 91 car, the yellow and black car, not that one, another yellow and black car, that is number 64, heading into its grid position, Tom Eden. But Gordon Sawyer, the big loser, because he finished after that contact with William Smith down in 10th position after yesterday's race, and lost quite a few championship points. There is Nuttall then on the pole position, the black and gold DPR prepared car. Stephen Nuttall, well and truly, I should say, in the zone ahead of the 30 minutes of racing that's about to get underway. They will have another green flag lap, though, before the race actually starts. They've just used the shorter Foster's circuit to get round to the grid for the time being. James Murphy there will line up second place. So James Murphy had a win at the season opener at Donington Park, hasn't won since, and a non-finish that he suffered at Silverstone in the middle of the year has really dropped him down in the championship standings, so he'll be hoping maybe to get back onto the top step of the podium in this one. Henry Heaton, second in the championship, twice a winner so far this year. He lines up third on the grid, and 4th place there is the number 5 car. Number 5 is Greg Monks. Greg Monks another who's had a bit of an up and down season, I think it's fair to say, but he has been on the podium twice, didn't race though in the last couple of events. So from a championship perspective, Greg doesn't really care about the points. He's just out there to try and get some good race results, some race wins ideally. As we're seeing a sign or a message on the board there saying delayed start delayed by 3 minutes. I know not why, but there is now a yellow board being held out saying that the start's been delayed as well. So there was a little recovery work to be done after our Formula Ford race just now. And I wonder if maybe that's still ongoing, maybe some barrier damage or a car that's a little bit tricky to get going once to get up onto the flatbed truck and back to the pit lane. But either way, the drivers are now sort of left out there all on their own on the grid with not a huge amount to do for the next couple of minutes. There you can see this sort of ever-present threat of rain. Now that does look a little bit like it's raining. That's probably less than a mile away from the circuit. And although the temperature is pretty nice, it is a very muggy, humid day. It does kind of have that feel about it that the weather could close in at any moment. We have had a little bit of rain this morning in the area, but nothing really that's troubled the drivers out on track. But as you can see, these Caterham 7 Championship UK cars, the 420R Caterham, all running on slick tyres. This is the top tier of Caterham Motorsport racing in the UK, and it is the only Caterham Championship that is recognised as a national racing series. So the winner of this championship is the Caterham Racing Champion, essentially, in the United Kingdom come the end of the year. The cars are 2-litre engined Caterhams, which produce around about 180 brake horsepower, which in a car that weighs about as much as a shoebox is an awful lot, and it makes these cars very, very rapid out on circuit. The average speed for the winner yesterday, Stephen Nuttall, 90 miles an hour average speed. So you can imagine the speeds that they're getting at the end of the Lakeside Straight or up over the top of Clay Hill. But it's the corner speed that's especially impressive. As the drivers really throw these cars around side to side through the chicanes and such like. Got a 6-speed sequential gearbox, a bespoke racing chassis, single-seater, although they're not centrally seated. As you can see, the drivers all sit to the right-hand side, but it is a single-seater. It's as light can be. They don't even have the luxury of headlights, which some of the other lower classes, things like the Road Sport, for example, might have. This is the pinnacle of Caterham racing. And now that John Byrne has stepped aside to let a few other people have a go at winning this championship, it's become a really competitive championship with a number of different drivers capable of winning. We've had 5 victors so far this year. Stephen Nuttall with 5 victories, the winningest driver, if you like. Henry Heaton has 2. 3 wins have gone to Gordon Sawyer, 2 to Will Smith, and 1 at the season opener at Donington Park went to James Murphy, and a whole host of other drivers, the likes of Jake Swan-Dixon, for example, and Greg Monks, have had podium finishes over the course of the season as well. So it really has been wide open. But Stephen Nuttall, as we now get towards this latter part of the season, starting maybe to assert himself as the championship favourite. So that is the reason for the delayed start. There's a car up at Lodge, the Formula Ford there from the previous race, being recovered still. So that is on the back of the low loader now. That doesn't have too far to drive back to the pit lane either. So I am hopeful that we will get the green flag lap underway. The fans are ready and waiting. Look, cameras at the ready to capture all of the excitement of the start of the race. That, though, is not so welcome. The rain has arrived. Now, that is at Hilltop, so that is at the other side of the circuit from where the cars are now, but that did seem to be the direction in which the weather was coming from, and that is the heaviest rain we've had so far today. I can tell you down here at the start-finish line, it's not raining, but at the far end of the track, it is just starting to drizzle. The lake is still pretty calm, but you can see the rain hitting it, so the weather moving in just in time for the start of the race. Now, if it gets really heavy, then the race director does have, or the clerk of the course I should say, does have the opportunity to delay the start further and give the teams time to change from these Avon slick tyres to a treaded tyre. That doesn't look like it's happening though, look, because the 1 minute board is raised. Significantly less than 1 minute later, the cars will head out onto their green flag lap, and then they will discover exactly what the conditions have in store for them. But as they all barrel down into cascades on that first lap, the last thing they want to find, really, is that there's been a rain shower and the track is wet and greasy and that they've all got no grip. So this is a bit of a voyage into the unknown now for the drivers. As we await confirmation that the green flag lap will get underway very, very shortly. Stephen Nuttall then on pole position at the back of the grid, a couple to watch then. As I said, Will Smith, the orange number 27 car, you can just see him right at the back, a non-finisher yesterday. He'd been given a time penalty anyway for exceeding track limits, but then he had that collision down at Cascades and ended up out of the race, but he was well and truly in the lead group, could have won yesterday's race for sure, and that orange car with the black nose, starting last on the grid, will definitely be wanting to make progress from there. Also Gordon Sawyer, number 91, who will start 10th after his involvement in that instance. There are quick drivers at the back, quick drivers at the front. Neil Fraser had some issues yesterday as well, so he'll be looking to bounce back from the 12th place on the grid, as that green flag lap does now get underway. So let's take a look then at how they line up for this second race of the weekend at Oulton Park for the Caterham 7 UK Championship. The championship leader, Stephen Nuttall, has the pole position. Alongside him, James Murphy looking for his first victory since the season opener at Donington. Henry Heaton second in the championship, third on the grid with Greg Monks alongside him. And then on the third row, Jake Swan-Dixon, who was very, very close to repeating the podium that he had last time at Brands Hatch yesterday. He will start 5th alongside Tom Eden. Then on the fourth row, Caterham Racing CEO is Graham McDonald, and Chris Hutchinson alongside him on that fourth row of the grid. Row number 5 is where we will find Alex Jordan, and there Gordon Sawyer, so he should come forward from 10th. He did so yesterday, and just as he reached the front was when he had that contact that sent him towards the back again. Johnny Jarrett and Neil Fraser, who I just mentioned, they're together on the 6th row of the grid. Whilst towards the very back then, we have Chris Aubrey, Rob Watts, who was a retirement yesterday, and the very rapid William Smith. So William Smith, absolutely want to keep an eye to, starting from the very back of this 15-car grid. This is, as I said, the pinnacle of Caterham Racing, and so only the very best come along to race in the Caterham 7 UK Championship. But what it lacks in sheer numbers, it certainly makes up for this grid in talent and in really super close racing. I had the rare opportunity to actually watch this race trackside. I went and sat down in the grandstand at Knickerbrook, and I cannot remember the last time that I felt an atmosphere quite like that at this sort of an event. The crowd were up cheering as the drivers lap after lap would appear over the crest into Cascades, 3 abreast for the race lead, and they'd come back over hilltop in much the same sort of position. And it really did catch the spectators' attention yesterday, and I really hope that this little bit of drizzle in the air doesn't put a bit of a dampener on this. I hope we get another race like that, because it really was one of the highlights of the season so far for me. There's Will Smith then at the back of the grid, the orange and black number 27. Field works its way up over Clay Hill underneath the footbridge, past where the old water tower used to be there, that little left-hand kink before Druids. Double apex right-hander, which the next time they arrive there, they'll be going somewhat quicker than this, you would imagine. It's one of the fastest corners on the circuit, crucial to get a good exit, because then you've got the run under the Pull Warwick Bridge down to Lodge Corner, and Lodge Corner is probably the best place to try and make a move here in Oulton Park on the international circuit. Many a Caterham race in the past have been decided on the very last corner. Now, that briefly was a glimpse of the McLaren safety car going not quite as quickly as it should do. I don't know if... it may well be that they're hanging back to see what this weather does, maybe, because the rain has now sort of arrived at the start-finish line, although the hardy Oulton Park spectators are not yet feeling the need to bring the umbrellas out. But there is just a bit of drizzle in the air. Maybe they're trying to just leave the race start for as long as possible, but the field is now in position. The start, though, is being delayed. So the start is being delayed. Can only assume this is something to do with the weather, and a sensible call, really, because they'd like to leave them on the grid as long as they could to see what the weather's going to do. But then, of course, all of the Avon tyres are going to start getting colder and colder and colder, and all of the heat they've just built up will be lost. So rather than wait to see what the rain does, they've sort of decided, yeah, we're going to delay the start. So that means there'll be another green flag lap, unfortunately. So they won't quite be going as quickly the next time they arrive at Druids as I hoped they would. And that was a green flag. They're getting straight into the green flag lap now. So a very short delay. There goes the safety car into the pit lane now. This is a race start, actually, so not a green flag lap. Okay, never mind. Side by side into the first corner we go. We are racing, then, in the second race of the weekend at Oulton Park, and it is going to be Stephen Nuttall, then, that has the lead and holds the lead, I should say, out of Old Hall Corner, but James Murphy trying to attack on the run down the avenue. Gordon Sawyer looks to have made some ground already there from the mid-pack, so too William Smith, but the leaders descend upon Cascades. Now, how much or little grip have they got? Almost a bit of contact there, maybe, between Tom Eden, the yellow car, and on the inside of him was Greg Monks, the white car with the black trim, but they just about avoided significant contact. First lead change, no, not quite. Stephen Nuttall fending off James Murphy through Ireland Bend, and actually Murphy now could lose second place. A bit of contact there actually, because as Henry Heaton in the green car moved up to take second away from Murphy, he almost got into the back of Stephen Nuttall. In fact, he did. Nuttall has some damage, and so Henry Heaton dropping back into third place now, but that was lucky not to end in more significant contact than it did. You can see there the wing on the left rear corner hanging loose on Stephen Nuttall's car. Further back, meanwhile, the yellow and black car is Gordon Sawyer trying to drag himself alongside Graham McDonald, who was getting well and truly stuck in yesterday's race. And is Sawyer going to try and get up the inside into the chicane? Yes, he is. Look, the yellow car ducks out of line, but McDonald on the outside hangs tough and holds on to the position. So the leaders work their way through Hislops and Knickerbrook for the first time of asking. There is that little group. They've got the 25 car over Neil Fraser, who's had a much better start this time. Said yesterday he pulled off the line in a plume of smoke and wasn't quite sure what the problem was. Now we've got our first lead change then, and James Murphy gets it going into the double apex right-hander at Druids Corner, and will now try to make good his escape, but we know that that is almost impossible to do in Caterham racing, given how evenly matched the cars are, how important the slipstream is. They're sideways there and side by side into Lodge Corner. Greg Monk's running out wide. Jake Swan-Dixon is the white and black car just behind him in fifth place, looking to try and take advantage. William Smith there, he's going to have picked up a few places from where he started. As side by side we get another lead change. That's Stephen Nuttall moving himself ahead of James Murphy. So Murphy led at the line by 52 one-thousandths of a second, but Nuttall was back ahead by the time they came out of Old Hall Corner. The track, I'm glad to say, doesn't look too slippery, does it? The cars are sliding around, but they do that anyway because they have zero aerodynamic aids, these Caterhams, all reliant on mechanical grip. So that does mean that they tend to hang the tail out a little bit. James Murphy on the inside of Nuttall, whose wing almost comes off completely there, which must be catching the attention of James Murphy, you'd think. Nuttall, though, for the second lap in a row, retains the lead going through Ireland Bend. This battling, though, is just allowing Heaton and Monks and Swan-Dixon to close in there, third, fourth and fifth. Then it's Tom Eden and Graham McDonald still ahead of William Smith then. So, in fact, Smith came across the line in 10th place, didn't he? So Will Smith lost a bit of ground there coming out of Lodge Corner. Oh, the leaders all sideways. I think it must be raining at this part of the circuit. Tom Eden bounces over the grass, manages to save it. That was a scary moment, but Graham McDonald and Chris Hutchinson go through. I think it's raining a bit harder now at this end of the circuit than it was a lap ago. And as the leaders, they're the pioneers. They were really sliding around a lot. And look at the way that it's bunched the whole field back together again. Nuttall still leads from Murphy. It's the same order inside the top five. But behind them, it was all getting very, very squirrely indeed. And lucky not to have lost any on there in that little sequence of corners. Back over the hill now towards Druids they go. And of course, once you arrive at one corner and it's slippery, that can knock your confidence then for the next half a lap or so. You never quite know what sort of grip levels you're going to get when you get to the next sequence of corners. Side by side for the lead, though. It won't deter them too much, will it? Murphy to the outside. That bodywork maybe rubbing a little bit now on Stephen Nuttall's left rear wheel. And a little bit of tyre smoke, maybe. Murphy finds some grip round the outside. He's going to have more momentum over Deer Leap, and James Murphy does now get back into the lead of the race. He led the previous lap by 52 one-thousandths. This time he's a whole tenth of a second ahead and successfully defends the lead into Old Hall Corner. So lap number 3 begins. Murphy ahead, and now Henry Heaton moves up to challenge his championship rival, Stephen Nuttall, for second place, wheel to wheel over the curb. They're both sideways, inches between the wheels there as they came down the hill, and Heaton, in fact, is the one that gets sideways through Cascades. Behind Gordon Sawyer, look, muscling his way up the inside of Jake Swan-Dixon. Oh, contact! Off into the barriers goes the championship leader. Stephen Nuttall is out of the race, and that is a scary, scary place to be off the road. Oh, he's sliding back into the track. That was really, really terrifying stuff. Thankfully, they've all avoided it, but Henry Heaton and Stephen Nuttall, the top 2 drivers in the points, making contact, and Nuttall ends up in the barriers. Heaton has lost out as well. Look, he's now battling with Gordon Sawyer, who crossed the line in 5th place. So Heaton is down into that 5th spot now. And Nuttall, amazingly, is carrying on. They build these things strong, don't they? The bodywork is damaged, but maybe he got away without too much suspension damage because he hit the wall flush. Let's see a replay of it then. So Heaton is wide and slow through Cascades, but Nuttall then has a moment of his own coming out of the corner. Heaton goes to the inside and Nuttall kept on coming across. Not a lot really that Heaton could have done to avoid that. And then Nuttall, as I said, he hit that barrier pretty flush down the right-hand side. Maybe that means that the suspension didn't get damaged. You can see Heaton is alongside and Nuttall crowds him over to the grass on the inside. Heaton can't go any further left, and Stephen Nuttall, I'm afraid, may look back at that and regret it, because that will certainly have cost him a shot at the race victory. Now, is that Stephen? No, that's not Stephen, is it? That's another driver, I think, that we've lost elsewhere around the lap, as the leaders head towards Lodge Corner. So the new order then is James Murphy, the leader, but he locks up and runs wide at Lodge, so still struggling for grip a little, I think. Greg Monks now is into second place. Greg Monks yet to win this year, the number 5 car, with Jake Swan-Dixon third. Sawyer is fourth, Heaton is fifth, and Graham McDonald sort of rounding out that lead group in 6th position now. William Smith, by the way, not making the progress I thought he would. He's down in 10th place still, as Gordon Sawyer moves up to challenge for 3rd place now. Down into Cascades. He's on the inside line for the kink at Denton's, but the next real corner at Cascades is a left-hander. Oh, and off goes Gordon Sawyer. There's no grip. Gordon Sawyer off through the gravel trap, and he tried to find some grip around the outside, but maybe with the rain coming down, it was a bit more slippery than he realised. The onboard camera captures just how slippery the grass is as well. As he tries to rejoin, he can barely get the car back in the right direction. So Gordon Sawyer in strife. It's clearly getting wetter and wetter out there now. Sawyer then was 4th at the start of the lap, but I reckon has dropped down now to about 11th or 12th position as the safety car, unsurprisingly, is scrambled. We didn't see the number 80 car of Alex Jordan come through at the end of the previous lap, so Alex, I'm guessing, is the driver that we saw trudging away after retiring. I don't know why he retired, but that car, I'm guessing, is in a slightly dangerous position and needs recovery. And that, coupled with the fact that cars were skating off everywhere in the slippery conditions, has prompted the clerk of the course to bring the safety car out. A moment or two too late, really, for Gordon Sawyer's liking. He would have very much liked to have had the safety car come out before he slid through the gravel down at Cascades. So that was an entertaining first third of the race. We'll have a little pause now, and then we'll get going once again in a moment or two. Gordon Sawyer, there you can see the rain on the bodywork and on the little sort of, can't call it a windscreen, can I? Put the little wind protector ahead in front of the driver. This was the moment he had. Just carried a bit too much speed in, and you can see as he turns in, the tyres aren't gripping in the way they should do, and that is because it's raining, so he slides through the gravel. This is the on-board view, so he's up alongside Jake Swan-Dixon at the moment. Jake is to the left. You might just see him now as we career into the corner, and then the car just understeers wide, and because you're on the outside line already, you've got nowhere to go. If you lose grip, you're straight on the grass and then through the gravel trap. Now, teams are readying wet tyres in the pit lane. Is anybody going to dive for the pits, I wonder, to change rubber? Doesn't look like it. The leaders have all carried on, but this would be a good time, wouldn't it, to pit, because it's not the work of a moment to change tyres on these cars. But if you can do it behind the safety car, you're less likely to lose a lap in doing it, and it's clearly getting slippery out there. I'm surprised no one at the back of the field, especially, decided to come in and change to wet tyres there. Maybe next time around. I still haven't seen where Alex Jordan's car is, so I can't tell you really how long this safety car is likely to last, but I can tell you by looking out of the window that the rain is coming down properly now. So, and there you can see the evidence of that, the fact that the spectators are now cowering beneath their umbrellas. So you can see the grease there, the lines being cut through the grease on the track. It's definitely getting wet, and if it continues to rain now over the next 5 minutes or so, it ain't going to dry out before the end of the race, you'd imagine. There is the recovery vehicle at Shell, so somewhere in that barrier, I think, is a Caterham that once belonged to Alex Jordan, but Alex, out of the car, as we can see, is absolutely fine, but the damage done means that he can't get going again. There may be a bit of barrier repair that needs to be done as well. There you can just see from on board with Gordon Sawyer, the car was either in the barrier or against it on the right-hand side. That barrier is there to prevent a car from skating through the gravel coming out of Ireland and then re-emerging into the middle of the road at Shell, which has happened before. So the barrier is there to prevent that from happening, but it does mean that you're more likely to hit something if you get it wrong through that quick left-hander you can see in the back of shot. So the rain coming down then, no one pitting, but the order is as follows. James Murphy, the leader, Greg Monks in second, Jake Swan-Dixon third, Henry Heaton fourth, and Graham McDonald fifth, ahead of Chris Hutchinson, who now catches that group in sixth, Tom Eden seventh, Chris Aubrey eighth, Will Smith ninth, and Neil Fraser into the top 10, ahead of Ron Watts, Gordon Sawyer, Johnny Jarrett, and Stephen Nuttall. So 14 of them still running then, and how long is this safety car going to be out? You would imagine at least one more lap, which does give the teams a chance, if they want it, to pull their cars into the pit lane now. But will they choose to do it? Or will they instead decide that the rain isn't going to stick around and the track isn't going to get it wet enough, and that they're going to leave them out there on slicks? The trouble is that running around at a reduced pace as they are now behind the safety car, the slick tyres are losing temperature all the while. The rain is not getting any lighter. If anything, it's going the other way. So the track conditions aren't going to improve, and when they go racing, they're going to have really cold tyres. So certainly someone like Will Smith, for example, who's not got a huge amount to lose here, didn't seem to have brilliant speed in the first part of the race and is still embedded back in 9th position. Surely it's worth him diving for the pit lane to try and do something about that. If you can get out on the right tyres, then that can certainly gain you a big chunk of time. Right, let's see. Does anyone come into the pit lane this time? James Murphy thinks about it. So does Greg Monks. We have got some coming in further back. The leaders have stayed out, but I think that might be Henry Heaton. I don't see Henry Heaton on track now, so Heaton, I think, is into the pit lane. Yes, there he is. That's Henry Heaton at the back of shot. The number 10 car is in. So make a note of that then. Henry Heaton, wet tyres going on to his number 10 car. And you can see now that it's going to take them a while, which is why they want to do it, really, behind the safety car if they can, because it could lose you a lap if you were to do it under green flag racing conditions. So was he the only one in? He was, wasn't he? So Henry Heaton then, the lone gambler. Now is there more to this, actually? Is it tyres? Is there a problem? Because they're taking the engine cover off. Now, actually, this might not be a strategic gamble. It might actually be a necessity that they come in to check the car for damage. Remember, he had that contact with Stephen Nuttall, who, by the way, is still running and has now caught the back of the field. So if the car's still driving straight, he might yet make progress on the restart. But Henry Heaton, I'm afraid, his big championship rival in the pit lane, and they are not changing tyres. That is instead either a mechanical issue or a legacy of that contact that they had that has damaged the car. So there is the Alex Jordan car being recovered from the Shell vicinity. There's the damage. Now, that was the corner that took the hit. The bodywork damage is one thing, but I'm intrigued about the suspension. Is the suspension bent in any way? Now, I'm not a mechanic, I'm afraid, but it looks okay to me. The wheel looks like it's pointing vaguely in the right direction, and honestly, if it's wet out there, you're not going to be leaning on that quite as much as you might be anyway. Just trying to listen into what the conversation was there, but not entirely sure. So anyway, Henry Heaton still in the pits then, and of course if they are now going to change the tyres, then they're running the risk of running out of time. Although I suspect we'll get one more lap behind the safety car anyway, because the recovery vehicles, as we just saw, are still on the circuit. They've got to get back now to a place of safety, and the field is coming out of Knickerbrook, so they're into the final sector. So unfortunate this, because we've lost one of our contenders in Henry Heaton now, potentially, and we are eating into the race distance now. 16.5 minutes to go, as you can see. 5 laps completed, about to be 6. There is Stephen Nuttall. So Stephen Nuttall, the championship leader, who hasn't finished outside of the top 4, I don't think, all season long. He's had 3 fourth place finishes, but he's not really had a bad race. And of course, yesterday's race was not bad because he won it. But he's now caught the back of the field, and he, interestingly, has not elected to pit to sort of check the car over, so clearly feels that the car is still A-OK. Speaking of not pitting, no one diving into the pits to change tyres this time either, so they stay in the same order. It really does surprise me that not one single person has chosen to take the gamble. Clearly isn't as wet out there as it maybe looks, although the rain looks like it's coming down quite heavily. It's quite fine rain, really. It's not sort of bucketing down. It does look like it's set in for the foreseeable. On board then with Gordon Sawyer, who had made progress, of course, from starting 10th on the grid. He was up there fighting for 3rd place when he went off, and and now leaves himself with it all to do again, actually a bit more, because he's 11th place now. He's even further back now than he was when he started. The Alex Jordan car, look, is now behind the barrier on the back of the flatbed truck. I think they're going to leave the flatbed there because it's well out of the way now, and we will hopefully then be able to resume racing this time. And I am getting confirmation now that we will be restarting the race this time. The safety car has upped the pace now to try and give the drivers an opportunity to build a bit more temperature in the tyres, because they've been going around very slowly in the ever-deteriorating conditions. So the safety car is making its way over hilltop now, ups the pace a bit so the drivers can generate a bit more temperature. But this is going to be nervy stuff. They are all still on slick Avon tyres. The Avon tyres are very grippy in the dry, but it is not dry anymore. It is quite damp out there. And of course, they haven't really had a full racing lap in these conditions yet. They've been going around slowly behind the safety car. They don't really know how hard they can push it when they go racing once more. So an awful lot that could still happen here. We've got these two cars coming from the back, or trying to anyway, after their issues earlier on, Gordon Sawyer and Stephen Nuttall. What can they do? Nuttall with damage, you would have to presume, but he's not pitted, so maybe he thinks the car is more or less okay. Right then, restart time, 14 minutes left on the clock. James Murphy leads the way. James Murphy, I'll remind you, 6th in the championship, hasn't won a race though since Donington Park in May at the start of the season. So can he now do better in this race and take the victory? Now, the safety car lights, look, are still on. So we'd heard that it was coming in this time. We believe what might be happening is that the field are being waved into the pit lane. They are all, I believe, going to change tyres now to wets. So this is a call that has come, I'm guessing, from race control to say that we're taking the decision out of your hands, essentially. It's too wet out there. We don't want you to go barrelling off into the first corner and slide into the barriers, because that wouldn't be good. And we're now going to get a checkered flag. A checkered flag and a round of applause for James Murphy from the team. Confusion reigns here at Oulton Park. Some of the drivers are pulling in for tyre changes. Others are being directed to the end of the pit lane thinking the race is over. Look, there's the checkered flag. So that tells you the race is over. But then you've got teams there like Graham McDonald and Chris Aubrey who are changing to wet tyres in anticipation of a restart. And then you've got other people like James Murphy, Greg Monks and who's that, 78, which is Chris Hutchinson, who have gone to the end of the pit lane. There you can see, well, just about see them behind the safety car, and they are sat there still on slick tyres, still none the wiser as to what's going on. And, well, I'm not convinced anyone knows what's going on. I certainly don't know what's going on. This is a truly bizarre set of circumstances. News as and when we get it, then, I think, is all I can say. Are we going to get a restart? We should get a restart. We are, as far as I know, not running massively behind time. This race due to finish at about 25 past 3. In fairness, it is 25 past 3 now, but we had a bit of time built into the timetable to allow for that. Might they, I wonder, try to rerun this race at the end of the day? That's another option if the time allows at the end of the day, once our other races here at Oulton Park are done. Might we then be able to get the race rerun? You can see the problem. The rain is really hammering down now up at the far end of the track. So that is the lake, which sort of stretches from the inside of Cascades all the way down Lakeside and then through Island Bend. So that's the tyre change going on for Graham McDonald. There you can see, look, the three drivers that had gone to the end of the pit lane, they are, well, two of them at least, James Murphy and Chris Hutchinson, are being pushed back to where their teams are positioned, I'm guessing for a tyre change, but no one has come to get Greg Monks. Now the marshals are pushing Greg Monks back, so that now means that everyone is going to have a tyre change. Surely they wouldn't bother changing the tyres if they weren't going to restart. So it looks as though this is a mandate basically from race control saying that they have to change tyres. The timing screens have now gone blank and the time has gone back up to 30 minutes. Now, it won't be a full 30-minute race, but that is usually what TSL's timing system does when they're about to amend the race distance for a race restart. So I think we're going to restart on wet tyres over 10 or 15 minutes, probably. And, well, the grid, I'm not sure how they'll decide the grid, probably how they were running behind the safety car, because we've done a couple of laps behind the safety car, so the order hadn't changed for a little while. what does all of this mean for Henry Heaton as well? Because Heaton technically wasn't running at the time of the red flag. Well, we never got a red flag, we got a checkered flag. We never did get a red flag, so who knows, who knows? We shall simply react to what we see. If people turn up on the grid for a restart on wet tyres, then that's great news. But for the time being, no news forthcoming. There you can see the cars being jacked up then in the pit lane, wet tyres being prepared. And there you can see the wet tyres going on. The wet tyres are a little bit narrower, I think, aren't they, just to help cut through the moisture on the road. So whilst this is all going on then, let's remind ourselves of what happened before the red flag. This being one of the big talking points, really. Stephen Nuttall versus Henry Heaton. They were side by side into Cascades. Then Nuttall had a moment coming out of the left-hander. Heaton got the run, pulled alongside. I don't think Nuttall realised he was there. Contact made, and the championship leader put another dint in the barriers down the Lakeside Straight, and then very nearly came back into the road. That could have been a real significant impact. Here's another view of it. He's slow off the corner. Heaton to the inside. Nuttall pulls over, bang, into the wall, and then slides backwards. And then as the car gets a bit of purchase, look, he's got the wheel cranked to the right, and that, of course, then directs the car back into the road. So that was a pretty scary moment. Then, a lap or so later, on board with Gordon Sawyer, who tries to make a move for third place on Jake Swan-Dixon, pulls to the right-hand side of the road. That gives him the outside line for Cascades, which in the wet should be where the grip is, but it wasn't. He skated straight off onto the grass, through the gravel, thankfully got the car woed up before he hit the wall, but you can see the stones there being thrown up onto and into the car, making for quite an uncomfortable ride now for Gordon. So, we still don't know what's going on. We are assuming there's going to be a restart on wet tyres for this race that was stopped without a red flag.
Can you ask if they want us to go at the end of the pit lane? Excuse me. To Park Ferme, how do you want me to get there?
What are you going to do?
So we're awaiting further news from the clerk of the course that have got slick tyres going back on now. So everyone directed it to change to wet, and then the rain, well, it didn't stop actually, it's still going. But that's the 21 car of Johnny Jarrett getting slick Avon tyres refitted to the car. Greg Monk's car there with the final tightening of the wet tyres. Lots of shouting, lots of confusion. So we shall see where they get directed then, because engines are firing again now. Will they get sent back on track, or will they be sent into the paddock area? Time is marching on now. This race should have finished 2.5 minutes ago. Right, movement. That's Chris Hutchinson, the green car. James Murphy, the black and orange. And I think they're being sent into the paddock, aren't they? Do they turn right? Yes, they do. So that race is not restarting now, at least. Whether they try to restart it later in the day, I don't know. But it's certainly not going to happen now. And it has now been declared that the race will not restart. So, what a strange set of circumstances. The car's pulled into the pit lane under a checkered flag, not a red flag, from behind the safety car, and then ordered to change tyres. Halfway through that, though, the race has been cancelled. So, a very, very strange end to what was promising to be a very entertaining race. But it is a race, then, if the result stands, that will be won by James Murphy from Greg Monks and Jake Swan-Dixon, with Graham McDonald getting, I think, a season-best result of 4th place there. So some drivers will be happier than others at the way that finished. Stephen Nuttall won't be, really, because he was robbed of a chance to reclaim some of those positions lost after his shunt down the Lakeside Straight, from which he rejoined, but with a slightly wounded car. So, as the weather well and truly sets in then, here is provisionally the result for the final race of the weekend for the Caterham 7 Championship UK. It was a victory for James Murphy, from Greg Monks in 2nd and Jake Swan-Dixon in 3rd, with Graham McDonald 4th and Chris Hutchinson in 5th place. But this is all so provisional, it's almost not worth going through because, well, we reached half race distance, I suppose. Some points can be awarded, but whether it's full championship points or not will be down to what it says in the regulations, in the unlikely event that races don't manage to run the full course. But unfortunately, that unlikely event has occurred here at Oulton Park. So, that was the Caterham 7 UK Championship then, which before the race was stopped, put on a real show, as they did all the way through the 30 minutes yesterday afternoon. And the weather ultimately intervening and stopping play midway through the race. Well, thank you for joining us. Anyway, there is still one more round left of the Caterham 7 Championship UK at Cadwell Park. But before we move on fully to Cadwell Park, let's remind ourselves of what happened in the first part of that race then. At the start of the race, Stephen Nuttall on the inside, James Murphy on the outside, ran wheel to wheel into the first corner. Nuttall, yesterday's race winner, held on to the advantage though from Murphy second and Heaton in third. But even from the start of the race, the drizzle was arriving. It meant that the leaders were never really sure of what sort of grip levels they had. Heaton into the back of Nuttall, that dislodged the left rear wing on the leading car, but more damage was to come. A lap or so later, no grip at all was available to the drivers as Tom Eden bounced over the grass up at the Britain chicane, and James Murphy moved up to challenge Stephen Nuttall to take the lead through Lodge. He was wide going into the corner. That then was converted into a good exit through Deers Leap, and then contact. Heaton and Nuttall into each other down the Lakeside Straight, and Nuttall got fired into the barriers. It looked like a bigger accident than it was because he was actually able to carry on and caught up to the back of the pack behind the safety car. Gordon Sawyer was fighting for third with Jake Swan Dixon when he went wide at Cascades through the gravel trap. And then we had an issue for Alex Jordan, whose car was off up at Shell. The safety car was thrown, and then the rain really started to come into play. The field were dragged into the pit lane. Initially, we thought to change tyres, but that ultimately was the end of the race. The cars never made it back out onto the circuit. Some of the teams got a chance, though, to practice their tyre changing, I suppose, and change over to Avon wets.